Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the differences between landing pages and on-platform Facebook lead forms. So if you're a contractor and you're doing over 7 figures every single year and you're currently running ads and you've been feeling like there might be a better way to go about this, I'm going to talk to you about that today. I'm going to make a good case for landing pages. I'm also going to make a good case for meta lead forms, and I'm going to give you the pros and cons to both. So if you haven't ever heard of a landing page, just a really quick synopsis of what that is. So a landing page is basically a small website that's designed to take people from interested to becoming a lead, okay? So on Facebook or on Google, when they click on an ad, it takes them off the platform onto your website. That's what a landing page is. A Facebook lead form is the opposite of that. It is just they click a button on Facebook or on Google, and it opens up a little form directly on the platform that someone can then fill out to become a lead. So let's go ahead and dive in directly to landing pages. These are going to be the very first thing that most people should be running, right? It's 9 times out of 10 we see most companies should be using landing pages, but we're going to also talk about some lead forms today. So let's get into landing pages. By the way, if you don't know who I am, my name is Hunter Larson. I'm the founder of Second Take, and in the last 18 months, we've generated our clients a little over $17 million after managing a little over $1 million in ad spend. So everything I'm going to be talking about today is just lessons that our clients have learned and that we've learned over the years of running advertising. So hopefully we can pass down some of these lessons to you, and you can implement these in your business as soon as possible to start making a lot more money. If you decide at some point in this video that you want to work with our agency, or at least see if we're a good fit for you, you can click the link in the description to work with us, and we look forward to talking to you soon. All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about landing pages. So the first things first. So landing pages have quite a few pros. And the very first one is that you're going to get higher quality leads, okay? So the reason that we get higher quality leads is because when someone clicks a link on Facebook and goes off the platform, we've increased the amount of friction that it takes for them to become a lead, right? Because now we have to wait for the website to load. The form might not be right in their face instantly, like it would be with a lead form, right? So immediately we're going to increase the friction. The other thing is that generally on a landing page, we're going to include more information about your company and about the service that they're going to be responding to, right? And this is also where we can show them more examples, more proof, more reviews, etc., which just raises the amount of interest that someone actually has to work with your company, right? So just naturally, you're going to get higher quality leads. The other thing with a landing page is that you have better controls over who we actually let become a lead, right? So we can put in filtering questions that somebody has to answer in a certain way to become a lead. So an example for contractors that we use on a frequent basis is, well, what is your anticipated budget for this project? So obviously, not everybody will know what the budget needs to be, but we want to weed out anybody that's saying we're looking for really basic service, right? And they're only going to spend, $200-400, something just ridiculously low. Obviously, let's weed those people out so that way your sales team doesn't have to talk to them. So that's number one. You're going to get higher quality leads. So number two, I kind of touched on this already, but we're going to pre-qualify leads. As mentioned, we can actually add filtering to allow the prospect to answer some questions. And if they answer it in a certain way, they either become a lead or they don't, right? So that's going to lead to that higher quality leads. Number three is more control. So control, trust signals. So as we take people off the landing page, as mentioned, we can actually increase the amount of trust signals that they have access to, right? So we could include video testimonials of homeowners that you've worked with in the past talking about their experience working with your company. We can also put in a whole bunch of Google reviews for them to go through. We can show tons of portfolio pieces, right? So projects that your team has recently completed. We can have all of that on the landing page, where a lead form, we really can't do that, right? We're really limited to basically just questions and maybe a little bit of like a headline and some text, right? So the amount of information that they can gather on if your company is legit on a landing page dramatically increases. All right, so next up is you own the data. Now, what I mean by this, when someone fills out a lead form, Facebook owns that data, right? We can access some of that data, but a lot of the data that we have access to is limited, right? And so Facebook has tons of data about that person, the IP address, they have all this other information that they won't share with you. So when we take them off Facebook, we can install our own tracking softwares, and all of a sudden, all of that data is ours, right? And the reason that's important is then we can decide what we actually send back to Facebook, which leads me to my next point. So we can feed Facebook only qualified leads. So because we own the data, Facebook doesn't see everything. At least we can choose to not show them all of the data. And the reason that that's important is we want to withhold the bad data and only give them the good. Because the way the Facebook algorithm works is the more data it has, it's going to start to try and optimize around the data that it has. So if we feed it the bad and the good data, it's going to try and optimize for something in between. And that's why you're going to typically see with lead forms, mediocre quality leads, right? It's going to be optimizing for anybody willing to fill out your lead form, and it can kind of be all over the place, right? Where with a landing page, someone can become a lead. We can call them, find out they're not qualified, and never tell Facebook about that lead, so that way it doesn't continue to optimize for people like that, right? But on the other side, someone fills out the form on your landing page, and all of a sudden you can immediately tell Facebook once you've talked to them, this was a qualified lead, we want more of this, right? And that will allow the algorithm to get smarter and start to improve the lead quality over time, which is something that you really can't do with lead forms all that effectively, because it's, like I said, you don't own all the data, so you can't control what Facebook sees and doesn't see. It just sees everything. All right, number 6 is that your landing page is an asset for your company. Okay, I'm also gonna say that this is a digital salesperson. So one of the cool things about landing pages is that because there's so much control, it actually acts as a digital sales rep for you that works 24/7. And this is an asset that you can leverage across not only your advertising, but you can send it to referrals, you can send it to even potential prospects that are come in from word of mouth, right? And they just saw you, right? Instead of sending them to your main website, if you know what they're looking for, let's say you are a plumber and you have a landing page designed specifically around emergency toilet repairs, you can send them specifically that page, and they're more likely to convert on that page than just say a website, right? So this is an asset that your team can leverage across the board, right? And that's the other really great thing about landing pages, is that once you've made it, it's now an asset that you own and you can use over and over again for various different use cases. So let's kind of quickly chat about the cons of landing pages, because although there's a lot of really great things to landing pages, there's also quite a bit that really isn't so great. So the first one is that you're gonna have a higher cost per lead. You do get higher quality leads, but that's also gonna come at a cost, right? So if you have a pretty small budget, and I'm talking $3,000 a month, right? If you're spending just like, basically the cost of an apartment, rent, you're probably not going to get that many leads. And if your sales team can't close deals very effectively, that's going to be challenging, right? You're going to want a little bit more volume and a little bit cheaper leads, so that way your sales team has more opportunities to get up there and actually close some sales. So that is one of the downsides to landing pages, is that because we've increased the friction to become a lead, it's also going to cost you more money to actually acquire leads from your landing page. All right. Next up is that friction can actually be detrimental to your campaign. So what do I mean by this? When someone goes on Facebook or Instagram, they're not there to click on your ad, right? Like they're there to see pictures of friends. They're there to look cat videos, right? They want to have a time to relax, entertain themselves. And so when we use a landing page, one of the downsides to this is that they can sometimes feel like they don't want to go through the process of going to another site, right? They're already on Facebook, they're already on Instagram, and they prefer to stay there most of the time, right? So your conversion rates can actually be quite low on a landing page, depending on the time of day, the type of service, how good your offer is, right? Because friction is very high, right? So this kind of goes hand in hand with higher cost per lead, but it is one of the downsides to landing pages, is that we do have to take them off of the platform that they're there to see pictures of family and friends and cat videos. So it is one of the downsides to landing pages, is that we're going to potentially lower the experience for the user that actually clicked on the page. Number 3 is that hosting. So this is web hosting, to be clear, can be a liability. So one of the challenges with having a landing page is that your website is now something that you have to watch out for, right? Because normally you post a website and boom, you just got it up, you whatever, right? Like it works, it gives my name, my brand, presence online and whatever. But as soon as we start running ads to it, now you're spending money on a daily basis to send traffic to this website. And so what happens is, if that website starts to slow down, right? Or if, let's say, even worse, there's some sort of server outage and you're spending money to this website that isn't loading, right? Well, that's going to be extremely detrimental to your return on ad spend. And if you're not watching this closely, this can become a big problem for you. And you can spend buku bucks wasting money for potentially days, depending on how long, these problems go unnoticed. So number 4 is it requires ongoing testing. So what I want to make clear here is when you use a landing page, you're going to need to adjust the copy, the layout, the colors, the speed. You're going to constantly be optimizing the speed, the pictures on there, the headlines, right? All of these little pieces play a role in how effective your landing page is at actually converting leads. And so the problem is that if you don't have an agency that has an internal team like ours that, is watching your landing pages and is conversion rate specialists who can look at the data and figure out what needs to be changed and when, you're probably not going to see much success with landing pages, right? You might get some leads here and there, but it's never going to be getting you to a point where you're like, yeah, I can scale my ad budget, right? You really need a team that's able to just continually test constantly, day in and day out, be looking at the metrics saying, this needs to be optimized, this needs to be optimized, right? And most contracting businesses are not set up to have somebody in-house to do that for them, right? So that's a huge con of landing pages, is that it does require ongoing management. Okay, so next up is flag domains can restrict your account. So what do I mean by this? So as we're running ads to a landing page, if your domain suddenly becomes a high risk in Google's eyes, right? Well, Facebook's also going to see that as a high risk website, and they might shut down your ads temporarily until that's fixed, right? So this kind of goes to web hosting as a liability. It's kind of the same thing, except this is a little bit more dangerous because it can actually restrict your account permanently, right? If Facebook deems your website to be malicious, or they think that you're phishing, right? Meaning you're trying to steal people's information, they can just say, yeah, you're not gonna be able to advertise on our platform anymore, right? So you need to make sure that when you're running ads with a landing page, that you're keeping an eye on these things and you're not using a domain that's gonna cause problems with Facebook thinking that you're a sketchy company, right? So it's very important that you have a domain that's secure, running properly, and isn't going to have Facebook looking at your website going, yeah, these guys are scam artists, right? So that is landing pages, the pros and cons. Let's kind of go through these pros one more time in summary. So some of the pros to landing pages is that you get higher quality leads. You can pre-qualify the leads using lead filtering questions. You can control the trust signals that people see, right? So the photos that you put on there, video testimonials, Google reviews, et cetera, et cetera. Number 4 is you own the data that you collect. And the reason that that's important is now we can feed Facebook only the qualified leads, right? Only the good data. So that way Facebook's algorithm can optimize only around good data and not bad and good and mediocre and all these different data points that Facebook controls if you're using a lead form. And number 6 is that a landing page is an asset to your company that you can leverage, not just in your advertising, but it'll rank on Google. You can send it to referrals, word of mouth. Your team can send it out to homeowners if they're looking for other services, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an asset that lives and exists in perpetuity. Some of the cons to a landing page is that you're going to get higher cost per leads. Friction can be detrimental if people are scrolling late at night. They probably don't want to leave Facebook or Instagram. They want to continue scrolling their cat videos. Number 3 is that web hosting can be a liability, especially if Facebook flags your domain as a high-risk domain, meaning they think that it's potentially a scam website. They can just restrict your ad account and say, you can no longer advertise on our platform, right? Which can be devastating if Facebook's one of your main revenue sources. And then number 4 is that, landing pages do require a boatload of testing, right? And if you are not set up in-house to have a conversion rate specialist, a copywriter, a graphic designer, a web developer on your team, you're gonna waste a lot of money using landing pages, okay? So moving on, let's talk about lead forms, because these are also a very solid choice for most contractors, depending on your team. And I say depending on your team, because what it really comes down to, for our perspective, is if your team is an absolute killer, right? Your sales team calls leads 15, 20 times a month, right? They are on the phone within 5 minutes. These guys are sales trained, right? They know how to close. You are going to have a fantastic time with lead forms because you're going to have insane volume. And most contractors do not have a sales process that's designed to convert lead forms consistently and at scale. Let's talk about some of the other pros and cons, because there's quite a bit here. So, all right, so first up is that we're gonna get cheaper leads. So cheaper leads / higher volume. Like I was talking about before, Facebook or landing pages get you more expensive leads. Lead forms, in comparison, can get you much less expensive leads. Generally speaking, lead forms are gonna be about 20 to 40% cheaper than landing pages, right? Which means 20 to 40% more leads, right? So if volume is a big concern of yours and you want to make sure that you have lots of people for your sales team to talk to, lead forms might be the play if your sales team knows what they're doing, right? and can actually close deals. Okay, number 2 is that they're instant on platform. Cool. So as mentioned before, on a landing page, we're taking people off the platform. With a on-platform lead form, such as a Facebook lead form, they click the Get Quote Now button, and instantly there's a form in front of their face that they can start to fill out, right? So it's instant. Your conversion rates are going to be incredibly high. Your lead costs are going to be lower, and they don't have to leave the platform. So they can fill out that form and keep scrolling, right? That's one of the huge pros to a Facebook lead form, is that, they're just easy for people to fill out, right? So you're going to get a lot of leads. Okay, so Pro 3 is that they're really easy to set up. Unlike a landing page where you need a web development team, a copywriter, graphic designer, photography, all these different things. With a lead form, you don't need any of that, right? You basically click a few buttons, you put in a headline, you put in a description, you select which questions you want to ask from the homeowner, right? Like name, phone number, email, etc. And boom, you've got a lead form. You can start running ads. You can start getting leads today, right? It's super easy. It's fast. And transparently, that's one of the huge pros for lead forms, is if you're looking for leads quickly, you can do that today, right? It takes no time. It's very cheap to set up, and it's exceptionally user-friendly as well. Okay, number 4 is, so it's Meta's platform, so you have no web liability, okay? So what I mean by this, as I was mentioning in the landing pages, you are liable to fix your own website problems. If something on Meta's platform breaks, that's on them, right? You don't have to deal with it. They will fix it. They're a $1 trillion company, right? They have massive development teams that can help solve things very quickly, right? Now, Facebook's transparently not known for being exceptionally fast, right? But they are going to be a hell of a lot faster than most local home service businesses that don't have a web development team on hand that can just come in and fix things quickly, right? So that is a huge pro. If you're trying to do this without having much management, a lead form can be great because Meta is the one managing all of the platform logistics and all that good stuff for you. Cool. So those are some of the pros of lead forms. Let's talk about some of the cons. The first one is that, yes, you get cheaper leads, but they're going to be lower intent. So this is kind of what I was talking about before, where if your sales team is an absolute killer, right? They're ready to call leads. They're going to be just dialed in, just on the phone, closing deals. Lower intent is not going to be a problem for them, right? They're going to be able to still close some deals because they have so many people to talk to. I mean, if they know how to handle those people, it can actually be good. However, if you don't have a sales process that can do that, lower intent leads is going to be a massive headache for your team, right? If they've been basically closing layup deals, like referrals their whole life, and then all of a sudden now they're dealing with leads that are moderately interested, you're not going to close any deals, right? And you're going to burn money, and it's going to be a nightmare for you to try and resolve that. And then you're going to go through multiple agencies, which you've probably already done. So you need to make sure that your sales process is intact before you start using lead forms, because you're going to get low intent leads. And I guess I want to also just really quickly before I move on, talk about why that's the case. As I was mentioning before, they don't leave the platform, right? So they can be scrolling cat videos, see your ad, boom, click, fill out the form, keep scrolling cat videos within seconds, right? It can literally happen, not like no joke, within 3 seconds, they can fill out your form and keep scrolling, right? But because of that, since it took them less time, the intent is not going to be as high, because now, they're like looking at this and they're going, yeah, I mean, I don't really remember filling that out. I filled it out like mindlessly, it just kind of happened. They can also like click on it, accidentally click on it, right? And then they'll just fill it out, because it's actually easier sometimes for homeowners to just fill it out than to try and find the X button at the top of their screen. So they just click all the buttons, fill it out, submit, and they never actually wanted to fill it out, right? So that can be a problem with lead forms. That's why they're sometimes lower intent. They're just not leaving the platform. They're scrolling cat videos, right? And so they might just forget that they filled it out. All right, so next up is number 2. Lead forms on Facebook have this feature called autofill, which I always recommend turning off. It is the absolute worst thing in the world. However, autofill can be outdated, right? And that's a huge con, is if somebody has a Facebook profile that they made back in 2012 and they haven't updated it since then, so it's been 14 years, their email may have changed, their phone number may have changed, heck, even their name may have changed, right? These days, people are getting married, right? People are changing genders and stuff. So who knows? They might have a completely different name. If they haven't updated on Facebook, well, now all of a sudden you're calling a old phone number that is no longer connected to the person who filled it out, right? So that can be huge, big problem, right? And it needs to be resolved. We have some tips and tricks on how to solve that that we do for our agency clients. So if you want to chat with us about that, you can click the link in the description. Okay. Another con is that you get no browsing data / conversion data. One of the great things about a landing page is that we can actually install some tracking codes and see where people are clicking, how far do they scroll on your landing page, where did they finally make the decision to convert. However, on a lead form, we don't have that luxury. When someone opens the lead form, it's a ghost, right? We can't see well, did they want to fill out this question, or did they decide to fill out one question and then leave on the second question? And so we can't see any of that data, unfortunately, when we're using a lead form, which can be challenging if we're really trying to dial in and optimize our campaign. It's really important that we see, where are people dropping off on this form, right? Are they saying, yes, I'm a homeowner, not a renter, but then we ask them their budget and then they immediately stop filling it out because they feel like that's an intrusive question. With a lead form, you can't see that, right? That is just data that Facebook owns, and they don't share it with advertisers. So that is a huge con, is that there's limited optimizations that can be made. All right, so next up is that you need technical CRM integrations to make Facebook lead forms even worthwhile, right? So the first thing, obviously, we need to make sure that those leads being generated are getting sent over to your CRM so that way your sales team can call them, right? That's step one, right? But step two is we also still want to let Facebook know who's qualified, who's closing, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, with a landing page, we can control which data Facebook sees. Facebook sees all of the data, but we still want to give them good data. We want to give them good signals of like, this was a qualified lead, this person paid us $20,000, this person paid us 60, right? We still want to send that over, and that's a very technical process that using something called the conversion API. You are not a developer, right? And you don't know how to do that. That can be quite a challenge to set up if you don't have an agency helping you with that, right? So yes, you can set up a lead form quickly, like I mentioned earlier, but to do it correctly, you do need to set it up to your CRM using the conversion API. So that way we can send back more good data to Facebook to optimize for better leads. Cool. So number 5, kind of touched on this already, but people will not remember filling out the lead form sometimes because it is so frictionless, right? Like I said earlier, no joke, it can take 3 seconds for somebody to fill out a lead form on Facebook, and they may forget that they ever filled it out. You call them and they're confused why they're there, right? So just keep that in mind. If you have lead forms going, your sales team needs to be prepared and ready to handle people who don't remember filling it out, right? And just be okay with the fact that that's going to happen because, you know, you are getting cheaper leads, right? So there's trade-offs, right? All right, so the last con of Facebook lead forms is that they really aren't an asset for your company, right? They're purely just there to generate leads. Once the person fills out the lead form, they're gone, they're scrolling again, right? So it's really not going to build much brand authority for you, right? You might get some leads and you'll close some deals. Those will lead to more referrals. So there is going to be an indirect brand building, but the people that aren't converting right away, if they only see a lead form that's just a headline and some text, but it looks like the Facebook platform, they won't even remember what your company is. They won't look at your logo. They're not going to look at the colors and all of the things that you've done to make your brand the way it is. They won't see any of it. And so that's a huge downside for your company if that's something that's important to you. You know, if you're in the $5 to $10 million range, branding is when you really start, you know, that's the scale at which you start to really think about branding, and branding starts to become a massive asset for your company as more and more people in the area start to know about you, right? So you do want to keep that in mind with lead forms. If brand is really important to you, landing pages are definitely going to be the way to go. Alrighty, so to recap this entire video, right? If you've stuck around this long, I applaud you, right? For watching me yap for the last 20-ish minutes. But in recap, if your sales team is absolute killers, right? They're on the phone, they're closing deals, and all they need is just lots of people to talk to, lead forms is 9 times out of 10 going to be the right option for your company, okay? If you are a company that does not have a sales process that's really, really dialed in, and you want to close as many percentage of people as possible, right? Not as many, but you want 10 leads and you want to be able to close 4 of them, that's going to be a landing page, because landing pages, like I mentioned, higher quality leads, more friction, so the people coming in the door are going to have a much higher probability of actually closing with your company, since they likely know who you are, will remember filling it out, have already seen some of the trust assets that we put in front of them. So they're likely going to be more inclined to say, yes, I can tell that you guys are a great company. Okay. Alrighty. So thank you so much for watching. If you would like to have our agency take a look at what you've got going on right now to see if landing pages or lead forms is right for your team, you can click the link in the description. Just transparently, right? You do need to be making at least 7 figures in your company for it to work with our agency. It's not to say that we don't like working with small companies. Just transparently, the kind of advertising that we do is a little too costly if you're not already making at least 7 figures. But if you are, and you're ready to hit the gas and you're ready to get to 8 figures, you can click the link in the description. We'll take a look at what you got. We'll help you out. I think that's all for this one. Talk to you soon.